Hello there. Welcome back to another edition of Who Would Like That? This is a executive producer provided piece of content. Shout out to Christian and thank you for the suggestion. Today we're going to be headed into the twisted and dark world of the Poughkeepsie Tapes, a 2007 found footage horror film that's infamous for its disturbing content and delayed release. But here's the thing. This film hits a little closer to home for me, literally. I lived in the Hudson Valley for periods of my life, right near and at times in the city of Poughkeepsie. And with that in mind, pretty quickly this movie doesn't pass the smell test for what it's trying to tell the audience. The Poughkeepsie Tapes is styled as a mockumentary detailing the discovery of hundreds of tapes left by a sadistic serial killer in Poughkeepsie, New York. These tapes supposedly show everything: his stalking, murders, and psychological games. The film aims to be terrifyingly realistic, but for me, someone familiar with the area, it misses the mark in some crucial ways. So this is going to be extremely nitpicky as a local, but I feel like I need to get it out of the way first, especially considering this is trying to present itself as is it real? It's found footage. You don't know if it's fiction or not. If you're from Poughkeepsie, you know damn well it's fiction. If you've ever spent time in Poughkeepsie or the Hudson Valley, you'll notice the movie fumbles little details: road names, routes taken, landmarks, and just a general vibe of the area. These are things that locals would pick up on immediately. It's not really a detriment to the movie. If I watched something about Calgary, Alberta, Canada, the only thing that I'd be able to reference is, the hockey team, the Flames, their rivals are the Edmonton Oilers. Other than that, I've got nothing. If you told me that's something that took place in Calgary, Alberta, Canada, the crossing of Elm and Main Street is where all the hot things happen, I'm going to take your word for it. But as a Poughkeepsie resident, a movie that claims to be authentic pulls people like myself out of the experience. At that point, almost instantly, you're watching this as a fiction, which shouldn't we all be watching these as? But part of the allure of this movie is, did it happen? I don't want to say that they don't do their homework, but it feels very surface level at times. Again, this is nitpicking. The way they explain that whole hitchhiking situation doesn't make sense when they further go into detail as to the couple are from Poughkeepsie, but they were driving from Pittsburgh, which is 7 hours away. You're to assume that all of these murders happen in the Poughkeepsie area. So these two are at the tail end of their journey home, but there are things that just don't make sense. If he's primarily staying in Poughkeepsie and just going around to dump bodies, and then he takes the bodies and brings them back to Pennsylvania, and they figure out that the station wagon only holds about 200 miles worth of gas, so they go into Pennsylvania and go to all the different gas stations. And what? But they trick you because they give you a scene where the guy is doing sign language for an event that he hasn't done yet. It's smoke and mirrors. Again, you set this somewhere where I haven't lived, and it's nothing. The backstory on some segments is foggy to say the very least. Plus the elements of how paperwork goes between state departments. I'll take your word for it. And if you are from the Poughkeepsie area, some of the elements that add to the confusion is there was a real-life serial killer in the Poughkeepsie area. Getting you into the movie, anyone from the area thinks, that's got to be the Kendall Francois stuff. For those of you who don't know, Kendall Francois was a serial killer in Poughkeepsie in the late 1990s. His victims were only women, and he had quite a few. The key difference here is there weren't tapes. He didn't document his crimes, and you figure out relatively early that that is unrelated to whatever this film is trying to portray. But it's hard to ignore the association. And if you consider the fact that this movie has some sort of infamy, the realistic approach feels a bit foggy. Let's get into the acting. Oh, brother. I get mockumentaries are supposed to have some sort of gray area of not looking like acting, not looking like real life, blurry visuals, stiff acting. That all makes sense for a mockumentary. It just comes off as cheesy at times.
Yeah, I know.
Right down to being within a classroom for police officers. And I don't know, considering this film came out in the age of The Office, it's hard to take certain portions of this film seriously. The experts and law enforcement characters, they don't quite feel like they're acting, but at the same time, they don't feel loose, like people just talking. There's some sort of rehearsed cue card element to the way things are being delivered. It doesn't feel or look like something that is a documentary or real footage or any of that. Like I said, it feels more like a cheap off-brand copycat of the American version of The Office, or maybe like a business training video, something you have to watch before you actually work at a retail store or something. And then you have these moments intertwined with all of this real footage. It just jump scares and gore. It feels too try hard. The tone of the movie, it feels like it doesn't know what it's doing. Technical issues with the film, it tries to have its cake, eat it too, and then sell it later on, is my issue with it. I mean, they open the film with you not really knowing who the killer is, and there's a third act reveal that something isn't as shocking as I think the filmmakers would have intended. I would say a movie like this isn't something that people would go to for a great story. This is more classic horror than it is modern horror, and that sounds as snobby as it's going to get. I apologize. But there's some unsettling footage. There are some buzzy topics that are covered. Again, animals, kids. It's unsettling, but I think it's more unsettling when you start using reason. There are a couple of scenes that it just, I don't know. If they're trying to present it as real, I have questions like, who raised those kids? Maybe your kids deserve to be kidnapped because what? The way things develop just confuses me, to say the least, and doesn't work, to say the most. Some elements where the film falls short is motive. We don't really understand why these things were done. And sure, there are moments where that could feel extra scary, but considering how intimate a lot of the filming was done and how we have all of these tapes, hundreds and hundreds of tapes of women squashing balloons, I think we would have something closer to motive there, considering he always had a camera. It's not to say that this film is void of ideas. There are certainly moments where if you just take some of these little scenes and make a movie about what the potential of that moment could have been, there's something there, but it's just a lot of missed potential. I am so sorry to say this, but right off the bat, having this feel real only to present itself to not be that takes me right out of the movie. And from there, perhaps I'm only trying to find holes. And at that point, I'm looking at this film like, okay, so this guy's filming people in the 80s. No video camera in the 80s was small enough to just tuck on a counter. The realism of it really misses for me. And as a movie who tries to present itself as real, as blurring the lines between real and fiction, it just doesn't work for me. This is one of those movies that there's some gnarly things that happen in this movie, but if you're like a gore hound, you can go get those clips and not really have to sit through the entire relatively short movie. Granted, it starts on the wrong foot for me. It's this realism thing that takes place in an area that something messed up really did happen. Within minutes, you're like, oh, kind of a bait and switch of sorts. That's not to say that this film is all bad, mind you. This film certainly has moments. I'm not exactly a fan of found footage stuff, but if you can easily fall into a world that a film is trying to get you to believe exists, it's done well enough. I mean, before the 2010s, nobody would accuse horror films of having the greatest acting, so par for the course as far as that is concerned.
It was obvious that they'd all been killed in a horrific manner.
And the gore and the scares are certainly serviceable, to say the very least. If you have interest in this, this certainly can get under your skin. It obviously has gotten under people's skin. But again, if you're aware of the area and things that maybe this movie could have / should have been emulating or referencing, it feels more try hard than terrifying. If you mix in some of the staples of the unsettling horror universe, I guess I can understand why this movie has some allure to people in the community. Things like torture, gore, and the hot button taboo of kids and pets. This movie will strike up certain people's emotions and do so rather well. But if you're from Poughkeepsie or someone familiar with the area, this story might immediately bring to mind Kendall Francois, a real-life serial killer who terrorized the town in the late 1990s. And that's kind of where things get complicated. To divert for a second, to let you know what I was kind of expecting going into this, being someone from Poughkeepsie and in the area when all this stuff was going down. Kendall Francois, unlike the fictional killer in the Poughkeepsie Tapes, didn't film his crimes. Instead, his horrifying acts happened behind closed doors. Literally. Francois murdered 8 women and kept their bodies in his family home, the attic to be specific, which was just blocks away from a local college. The smell of decomposition was so overwhelming that the neighbors and even Francois' family members complained about it. There was even a rumor that Francois had the nickname Stinky amongst people in the area. Yet for years, no one discovered what was happening. That's the real horror. The horror that hides in plain sight and hides their dirty work behind closed doors. And within minutes, that's the biggest difference with this movie. The movie leans on shock value, graphic torture, unsettling footage, and as someone who loves having a blurry, technically funky looking screen, it was even a bit much for me. I love the aesthetic of old VHS with some funky looking picture and interference all over the screen, but it seemed like a bit too much here. For realism's sake, it certainly looks like someone just upgraded a 1985 VHS and, I don't know, used the worst VCR in history to record these things and then to throw it up on an HD image. It's a bit much for me. Again, maybe if I didn't know that it was real, the whole interference, the wonky VCR imagery, maybe it works. I'm not a found footage guy, and as hypocritical as this is, if you're going to put effects on the screen, have it look better. Going back to Kendall Francois, the issue is his crimes didn't need embellishment. Considering this movie tries to play on the whole, this is found footage, this happened, you have something there in the Francois murders, which happened in the area. It was terrifying already because it actually happened. And if you're not from the area, it's not really that much of a difference. He targeted vulnerable women, most of whom were sex workers, preying on those that society often overlooks, much like many serial killers. The system failed these women long before Kendall Francois took their lives, which adds another layer of tragedy that this film never really touches with its fictional characters. There was also an alleged motive of Kendall Francois. It was brought up that these acts were something of revenge from Francois, as he had HIV and alleged that he had gotten it from one of these sex workers. So here's the thing that gets me. This movie, the Poughkeepsie Tapes, tries to create this bigger-than-life aura, but the problem is you had a real larger-than-life boogeyman, but it misses what's truly scary about real-life murders, much like Kendall Francois. It isn't really so much about elaborate schemes or creepy tones. I would argue it's about how evil can just blend into the mundane. Francois was a school hall monitor. Imagine that man in the halls with your children. He lived with his parents. No one suspected he was hiding the bodies of his victims only a few feet away. I would say that that's scarier than any fictional horror character can be. By comparison, the movie's focus on the theatrical scares and over-the-top villainy feels almost shallow. Does that make the film completely worthless? Of course not. If you're a fan of found footage horror, you can do worse than this, that's for sure. It just doesn't work for me. And again, you factor in the true crime parallels that this movie skates near, it falls flat. It breaks the immersion for me, and it does so relatively quickly. The cheesy acting doesn't help, and again, to constantly harp on the real-life killer that was from the area, it just pales in comparison to what they could have been doing. But of course, this is a Who Would Like That video, and yes, this film deserves to be in this category for many a reason. It shows some unsettling things. The tapes of the torture, not a fun experience. Knowing that they're acting doesn't change things. People bound and filmed, and much like one of the people in the film said, The thing that kind of gets me the most is a woman bouncing up and down on a balloon. That troubled me more than anything. I'm too desensitized, I tell you. The real-life crimes it unintentionally echoes are far more terrifying and tragic. If you're from the Hudson Valley or Poughkeepsie area, this film may not hit the way someone from Georgia might interpret it. But that's just me. What do you think? Does the fiction add to the horror genre, or does it pale in comparison to reality? If you do a search on Google, the first thing that pops up is the Poughkeepsie Tapes a real story? That, and the second highest, of course, where can I watch Poughkeepsie? You want to watch an entire city? But as far as the who would like that category of films, it's home here. It certainly has stuff that makes you uncomfortable, but is that uncomfortable in an entertaining way, or is there some sort of message behind the discomfort? I don't think so. I think this is just like, forgive it, a mixtape of scenes that probably will be highlighted for reasons that people don't want to feel things. Whereas I think other films in this series, there's some sort of challenging art to the film. This is more a greatest hits of gnarly stuff to see on a screen. The Poughkeepsie Tapes is a movie that falls in line with something like The Blair Witch Project, where it doesn't get proper marketing and it's more viral campaigns. And with that, a public perception is, oh, the studios aren't talking about this because they don't want to be sued for talking about real life things. And that kind of gets all over social media. Granted, social media wasn't really anything near what it is now. But when you have these viral campaigns, it's easier for someone to use common sense in the wrong direction and think, oh, yeah, this is real because the big guys aren't talking about it. And especially today, when you think of how much real life serial killers from the past is a thing, how many Netflix documentaries are coming out about a thing that happened, it's far more easy to believe that this is about an actual terrible person than we're just making up ideas of terrible people. Oddly enough, to veer away from the real-life Poughkeepsie killer, while taking influence from some of the big-name serial killers, adding the snuff tape aspect makes it more of a taboo, something that people don't want you to see. These found footage films get popular when something else like it comes out, and most recently it was Megan is Missing in 2020. Another film that I would say isn't very strong, but I think people just want to believe that gnarly things happen while not really thinking about the gnarly things that do happen. The mystery to something maybe being real, I guess there's more intrigue in that. And I don't understand what that means when people see really messed up things happen that are real. But that's just me. Man, I can't wait till I watch a movie about two friendly bunnies who just hang out and fix the local dam with the help of a beaver, and that's it. Just a good, wholesome movie. And I could say who would like that because it's just wholesome. A boy could wish. Be sure and interact with this video to let me know to keep doing stuff like this. Like, comment, subscribe, but always ask yourself, who would like that?